Jason Miles. Please welcome another edition of This Revolution Podcast. This is our Wednesday episode. For those of you that are patrons, you are getting this audio only a day early on Tuesday. So happy Tuesday to everyone. And if you are a patron, reminder, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll be going live. As I record this, I don't remember who the live show is on Tuesday. But don't worry. By the time you're hearing this, there'll be a video that was already up introducing the show that I labored over to make interesting and entertaining and added music on it to make it even more engaging. And guess what? YouTube is trying to say that the music that I created is not mine. And have demonetized my intro video for our Sam Cedar episode. Now, ain't that some shit? So I'm fighting with them right now over this. Like, I go out of my way to make my own music because I can't, I don't want to use anyone else's. I don't want to deal with copyright infringement. And yet and still, copyright infringement. But if you are new to the show, Wednesday is our extended show day because it is a audio dump of our Saturday show, which is our Saturday free show. And I went way too long on the Saturday free show. Even without Pascal. Pascal was not there Saturday. He was writing a piece, which, I'm still not at liberty to say. Hopefully, by the time you hear this, it'll already be out. I don't even know. We don't even know when it's coming out. It's for a much larger publication. Wherever you're listening to this, write in the comments where you think that the piece is going to go. I'd love to see what people think about where he's writing. We're still in a lot of shock. This publication asked him, of all people, to write a piece. Their writing is quite far to the right of what we talk about. But it's an editorial piece. They specifically asked for him. They really enjoy his commentary on the idea of black politics being the politics of containment. And I will just say I read the piece, and it's vintage Pascal. It's a wonderfully, very well-written piece. I'm really excited for it. But this show was a show with Mike Watson, who is an artist and author. He's got a book currently out on Zero Books called The Meaning of Mark Fisher. And what was interesting was in reading the book, it was really in line with a piece I'm writing. And if you want to know more about that piece, as it's going through the This is Revolution editing process, like all of our pieces do, where you send it to the crew and they make their edits. I will say this, it's really nice to have your co-hosts literally be like editors. That helps when you have ideas and you're trying to write things down. But it's about the idea of calling everyone that you may think, or in the online podcast sphere, there tends to be this tendency where the listeners who listen to some of these shows kind of mistake the podcaster for revolutionary opposed to what a lot of these cats are, which is just internet influencers. And their shows, come off to me like that of an internet influencer. So when these people say something not to the liking of their fan base, then the next thing that people say, oh, you're a grifter, you're a con man. And I don't think these people are con men at all. I think they're just internet influencers, and they are more so slaves to the algorithm as they are to a con. I definitely think they believe what they say, right or wrong. And the memeing of Mark Fisher definitely is really getting into the weeds on a lot of the internet culture that sometimes we go on about on the show. But there were definitely moments where I'm reading the book, I'm like, God damn, I just wrote a paragraph that reminds me of this. So I wanted the conversation to be a little more fruitful, but I was also fighting with my Wi-Fi here in Baja, California. But my trusty host, Stefan, who you guys know as Thor Guevara, because y'all named him that. And Marcus of the Left Flank Vets definitely came in and helped out. So it was a great show. I'm really proud of what happened despite my poor internet. But wherever you're listening to the show, there's links in the description to Mike Watson's book, The Meaning of Mark Fisher. So get ready. We're going to talk about the Frankfurt School. We're going to talk about why Mark Fisher is still important. Meme culture. I am out. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to This is Revolution Podcast, free show, Saturday edition. I will have to apologize because we are starting a little later than usual. I see some early comments about the tardy start. Don't blame the Wi-Fi this time. Just blame the fact that there are two black guys on here that just wanted to be tardy. So I apologize for playing into the stereotype. I can't say it'll never happen again because most likely it'll happen Tuesday. That being said, Pascal will not be with us today. He is working on a very important piece. I am not, unfortunately, at liberty to say who it's for, but just know it pretty fucking big deal. We're all like, hey, good shit. So to take Pascal's place, we have another black man. You may know him as the only black man in Maine, and now he is one of many in Virginia. He is Marcus of the Left Flank Vets.
Yo, what's up, what's up, what's up? Always good to see you. Sorry I missed last week. Actually, someone had come into my chat the other day and was like, Marcus, where the fuck were you Saturday? It's like I had some shit going on. I apologize.
The show did very, very good numbers, and it did great numbers in the audio only podcast as well. So
it's probably because I wasn't there.
Yeah, no, that's not why. That's not why. And let's give a big shout out to one of the original Saturday crew members, Paul Prescott, who's running for office in his native Pennsylvania. He's running for state office. That is a big reason why Paul has not been on the show. Also, we want him to get elected, so he's had to stay away from being associated with us.
Cannot be seen with us.
I'm totally kidding. That's not true at all. But it's true that Paul's running, but he can still be associated with us. That part is not true. But another person that can't join us is Djene Bajalan, because as you guys should know, he has a new addition to the Bajalan family. He is helping with his new baby girl and also trying to corral the 3-year-old. So taking Djene's place is a new member. Like, I want to officially announce this. This person is part of the TIR family. And let's just introduce him by the name that you people gave him, that I think is the funniest shit ever. Thor Guevara, Stefan Birchamley.
Chat can judge if I'm too red.
I can't see anything because my Mexican Wi-Fi is now being very Mexican Wi-Fi-ish.
Oh
my God.
So our guest today has written a book called The Memeing of Mark Fisher. It's out now on Zero Books, and it definitely gets into, for those of you that watched the show Tuesday, and for patrons of the show that saw my deep dive discussion on how I feel about certain aspects of the left. This book gets into all of that. So I am really excited for you guys to meet the author of The Memeing of Mark Fisher, coming all the way live from the UK, Mr. Mike Watson. Give it up for Mike Watson.
Hi there. Great to be here. Thank you.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for writing a badass book. Now, your book discusses Mark Fisher and the Frankfurt School, and first and foremost, I think there's a lot of people here that are watching that may not know that much about the Frankfurt School. They may think it's literally a school, as someone said in a debate with what's that guy's name? What's the black guy's name? Marcus, the one we don't like that much.
Oh, God damn it!
Mark Lamont Hill. Yeah.
Like which one?
In the debate about critical race theory, he was like, no. It wasn't like a school like that.
Oh, yeah. What was it James Lindsay? I think is that dude.
Frankfurt School.
Yeah.
So can you briefly give us a rundown of what the Frankfurt School was and actually what it meant to Mark Fisher?
Yeah, the Frankfurt School is not a school, as you say. I think actually a lot of tourists kind of get lost in the middle of Frankfurt looking for the Frankfurt School, literally. And there isn't like a school building or anything. Actually, it was a private institute set up in the 1920s in Frankfurt, called in English the Institute for Social Research. And it's actually its second generation under its second director, I believe, called Max Horkheimer, that is the generation we refer to as the Frankfurt School. So basically, they're people who were loosely associated with this private institute, which looked into Marxism, but with a proviso that they tended to kind of gravitate towards cultural aspects, not towards revolutionary aspects. So I think this is kind of a safety kind of consideration that they didn't want. They were kind of flying under the radar, so to speak. They didn't want to kind of get, probably imprisoned or something in Germany at that time. So they researched more kind of how culture is important to the left-wing cause, and that's what they're really famous for. And the most famous people are Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Walter Benjamin, who was never even with the Institute, so he's kind of even outside the Institute. That's the thing with the Frankfurt School, is it's kind of the Institute plus other people. And then Herbert Marcuse. So one of the really important things about them is that a number of them were exiled during World War II and prior to World War II because they were German Jews, principally. Even those that weren't Jews would have been, just too communist to hang around at that point. So Adorno and Horkheimer and Marcuse ended up in the States in the 1930s and 40s. And Horkheimer and Adorno wrote a very well-known book called The Dialectic of Enlightenment. And basically, it's them looking at America and saying, well, hell, this is just about as bad as Nazi Germany. And, the kind of point is that there is something common to fascism, to capitalist democracy, and to Soviet communism at that time. Basically, they're all over controlled, and it's because they all follow a process of what Adorno calls identity thinking, which is where we as humans tend to identify elements of nature and just basically things outside us as individuals, and we give things names and categories and measurements, etc., to try and control those things. So it's just a basic human tendency. So as long as we do that, we're going to come up with controlling systems. Okay. So anyway, they say that, and they say that the culture industry, TV, radio, magazines, etc., is fundamental to that process of controlling nature, of controlling each other, etc. So we have to try and get around that.
And what's the relationship between this and Mark Fisher, would you say?
And then Mark Fisher, well, the thing is, it's more that this is like just running through Mark Fisher everywhere, but he doesn't actually mention the Frankfurt School very much in his most famous book, Capitalist Realism.
He talks more like about Deleuze and stuff like that, right?
I mean, the thing is, he did talk about the Frankfurt School in his last unfinished book, Acid Communism. But anyway, his most famous book is called Capitalist Realism. It's not so much that he talks about them there, but he talks about a process of co-optation. So he says that basically the left gets co-opted, gets owned effectively by capitalism perpetually. So whenever we come up with a kind of a useful, in terms of the left, countercultural movement, it gets kind of commodified, so it ends up appearing on t-shirts and things. So you see this a lot with, obviously, the famous one being Che Guevara. So you see Che Guevara t-shirts, watches, mugs, etc. But the example that Fisher uses most famously, and it's not an example that really belongs to the revolutionary left, but it's one we all know, is Kurt Cobain. So he talks about Kurt Cobain's kind of raw rage and how that got packeted and sold. But it just happens throughout culture. And then the thing with the book is, and why it's called The Memeing of Mark Fisher, is that he himself got co-opted, basically owned by the system in his passing, because he actually took his own life in 2017, tragically. But he's since become a meme.
If for the very young listeners in the audience, could you give a brief thing on Mark Fisher himself?
I mean, he's a writer who kept a blog called K-Punk. So basically, he went to Warwick University and was in a very well-known department there. I think it was called something like department, wasn't called quite this, but something like Department of Cybernetic Research. And this department, yeah, that's it, CCRU, but I forget what the initials are exactly.
Yeah, Cybernetic Research Institution, but I don't know what the other C is for.
Yeah. But it's a department that left us with many, many important scholars today that are still active, like Ray Brassier was one. And then anyway, there's a number of others. And Fisher basically came from that department and ended up keeping a blog called K-Punk, which was a very, very successful blog. And it was part of, this kind of really important theory blogging era. So in the early 2000s, we had a number of people keeping theory blogs. And people used to kind of gather around those blogs and kind of comment on each other's blogs and email each other and stuff. So what it effectively became is like an alternative academia. And actually a number of people running those blogs either hadn't finished their PhDs or weren't teaching in universities, etc. And Fisher actually wasn't in a university. He was teaching in what would be in America a high school. He couldn't actually get into university. So it's like an alternative site of publication. And from that, Fisher started Zero Books, a publisher that you're probably familiar with, a lot of the people watching, with Tariq Goddard and a number of other people. And there's a whole history there that's interesting that I won't get into. But anyway, they started this Zero Books, and Zero Books actually, yeah, I mean, it's a controversial thing right now, but Zero Books, actually, the whole thing was taking the energy of blogging and publishing books using that kind of energy, because back then we were at a point when you just couldn't get into the academic presses unless you were like, some kind of academic schmuck. They weren't publishing anyone interesting. And the main journals like Radical Philosophy also were very closed. Like Fisher was never in Radical Philosophy. That's a British journal, which is, it's like, the main left academic, but slightly far out journal. So people couldn't get published. So they basically blogged and then they made Zero Books. And the first raft of books included Capitalist Realism. So this is the book that Fisher wrote that went on to become hugely successful and has now sold over 100,000 copies.
Yeah, I mean, for the people in the audience who haven't read it, Capitalist Realism is very short, very readable, and has like constant kind of pop culture references. And I think exactly as Mike's saying, it's kind of a brilliant introduction to these kind of left ideas, especially at a time where you could only get this stuff through like a very impenetrable kind of approach, which I think has changed now, but Capitalist Realism was like a big push in that direction.
And
It
also,
is, yeah.
I want to add that Zero Books were they're shorter and very, very accessible. So have been a huge fan of a lot of the books.
Yeah. Which I don't know, like that's like I don't know if this is like a discussion for another time of like, but I found the same thing. It's like many Zero Books actually do kind of like tend to be a little bit shorter and more real, more readable. And I wonder if it does come from this like blogging type of thing where, just a little bit long, like longer form and actually, published on a page.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what their intention was, but a lot of the books are short. Yeah, there are a few longer ones. But I think, that format pretty much started there with Fisher. I mean, in terms of what the imprint became and how it carried on, I think Capitalist Realism was, a big influence, and that is a fairly short book. I think it's around, 90 pages or so. And I mean, just a great book because it very succinctly says some very important things, and right from the title. So the title is Capitalist Realism, Is There No Alternative? And the main kind of thesis is that we live in a society where reality is basically capitalist, where we can't, think beyond capitalism because it's taken over every aspect of our thinking and being. And then the is there no alternative is because literally we believe that there is no alternative. And there's this one thing that Fisher says that actually has been attributed to Frederick Jameson and Slavoj Zizek, which is it's easier to imagine the end of the world. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Those things really stick, those kind of points, and that's what's sticking with a generation of young leftists getting into theories through memes today. And I think he's memeable because his points are so succinct. It's not. I mean, in a way. Sorry, there's some kind of noise coming through.
Stefan, when you're typing, it's
okay, yeah, all right, no worries. it's I mean, it's not a bad thing that he's being memed, because I think some of his concepts can come over in memeing, but at the same time, I mean, memes clearly play back into capitalism. Even if you make a left meme, you know, we're all pretty much aware that we're giving data to the kind of internet giants like Facebook, etc.
Well,
but not only that, I mean, we're kind of caught up, we're kind of stuck twice, because we're giving data which is sold, so that's capitalist. But we're giving data which says, look, hey, look at me, I'm a socialist. It's like putting a big target on you. So tactically, it's, you know, it's not a good thing in many ways. But on the other hand, you know, it's getting people into the left. So I have conflicted feelings about it. So I think that, I mean, the internet is in many ways the best and worst thing that ever happened to us. And that kind of follows on from what Marx says about capitalism itself, in that Marx thinks that capitalism is kind of a necessary step along the way to socialism and communism. And I think that the internet, you know, is similar, that there's something there that we can kind of use, as long as we don't get kind of pushed the other way, which we seem to be at the moment.
And this is
to clarify for the chat, we all love Doug. No worries.
Yeah. But I mean, this is basically the like the point of your book is kind of like interrogating left internet culture through the lens of Fisher and the Frankfurt School. So I don't know if you want to do even like a little, like, I mean, kind of was just like a pitch for the book. But I think maybe even going on, like, and this is something that when you brought up the Shea shirts is, how do you think we get beyond this type of like, hey, socialism, communism as like this counterculture aesthetic? And you know, some of the Jason's saying that so his kid's got a Shea shirt that he bought from Target. You know, is 10 years down the road is going to be the same thing with a hammer and sickle, or maybe a Marx T-shirt.
Yeah, I mean, we're not far off. Maybe we're there in a slightly different way with Grimes. You remember Grimes the other day, a few weeks ago now, and now it seems ancient.
That was fantastic. That was a great like cultural moment. Like, not in a positive way, but in a fascinating way.
I mean, it's interesting because clearly she went out to be photographed reading that book and then looking like she was just casually walking down the road reading it, as if anyone walks down the road reading. But, you know, there's that kind of thing. I think that is the equivalent of Che Guevara on a T-shirt, you know, now, and it's happening constantly. And yeah, we need maybe to get beyond that. But I think this is something that gets me in trouble, because I think that memes with hammer and sickles and whatnot are not that useful to us. I think they're really the left response to the right reappropriating the swastika. I don't mean to say that there's a similarity between the swastika and the hammer and sickle. I mean, of course, there are like the argument about death rates in Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, but I don't really subscribe to that argument, that they're as bad as each other, you know, on that basis. But I just mean that, you know, tactically, the idea of opposing like a heinous kind of aggressive symbol with another symbol which appears to many people to be heinous and aggressive isn't probably going to get us very far. And actually the Frankfurt School are very big on this, particularly Adorno, who talks about how, I mean, basically, you know, this kind of like, you know, where you have like fuck capitalism writ large, you know, this kind of thing as art, it's not going to oppose capitalism very effectively, because you're playing back into the tendency to identify, you know, to give labels to things. You're playing back into the conflict, basically. And
Adorno, capitalism is like a totalizing system. If you're just saying fuck capitalism, then it doesn't really seem sensible what you're even saying fuck you too, right? Like kind of everything, which is kind of this nihilistic anarchist kind of approach.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, Adorno will propose abstraction, but, you know, this is where the Frankfurt School get very bourgeois, or people say that, you know, they're very detached and bourgeois, which I do deal with in the book, and they are to some degree. But, you know, I think there's some sense in this idea that, you know, rather than feed back into endless conflicts, we try and kind of calm things down and take a step back. And maybe through the internet we can achieve this, you know, through some kind of abstraction. I think the closest thing we've had is Vaporwave, the online music and kind of meme movement. I don't know if anyone followed Vaporwave.
I was big into Vaporwave at that time, I guess when I was a teenager.
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned it. Maybe I don't actually mention that in that book.
Could you explain for us what Vaporwave is exactly, for those that don't know?
Yeah, I'm not the most well up on this, but it is kind of a movement that relies on the rehashing of 80s music. So people basically take 80s tracks, slow them down, and mess around with them.
It's kind of like ironic
Yeah.
kind of nostalgia in that it was created by people who don't remember the 80s, making kind of 80s nostalgia music of kind of the Mark Fisher idea of like a lost future or whatever, where we had these utopian ideals in the past, and now kind of we're at the end of history, and instead of imagining something new, we're going back to a dream that we never even had as young people, and kind of imagining this. But obviously it's all kind of ironic, it's a joke. But I think that's really the limit of Vaporwave, that it kind of provides this critique. But then what do you do with that?
I think it's pretty hopeless, yeah. But I think that's part of its power. I think Adorno was deeply melancholic and depressive, and of course so was Mark Fisher. And I think this is interesting, where they kind of don't propose a solution. They kind of go, everything's messed up, so all we have left therefore is, Adorno says, abstract art, but Fisher kind of alludes right at the end of capitalist realism to depression and madness giving way to creativity. And I think that's the thing, that the Frankfurt School weren't ever coming from a position of strength. I mean, they were German Jews exiled from Nazi Germany. Walter Benjamin actually ended up taking his life as he was trying to flee, and he couldn't make it. He took his life on the French-Spanish border. For those who survived the war, I mean, there wasn't anything really good to grasp onto. For Adorno, when he returned to Germany after World War II, people were asking him, for solutions, and he was saying that anything we do is going to potentially lead back to totalitarianism unless we rethink thought itself, that there's something fundamentally wrong in human thought. So all he had condoned was abstract art as a path of action, which does seem very detached and bourgeois now. I wouldn't say it's probably the path now entirely. I think we do need to go and resist, possibly on the street, so to speak. We need to get out and talk to people and make very clear statements. I think abstract art can help, certainly. But the thing is, we're not in the same position as the Frankfurt schools. We haven't come through World War II. And particularly as German Jews or anyone else who suffered in that way. So I think we need kind of a mix of things. I think we've got beyond the kind of modernist tendency to like aggressively propose this or that answer. I think we need multiple answers.
Yeah. One thing you say or highlight in the book is kind of the idea that there's people on the left who they have a very large platform, whatever, but kind of they become dedicated to kind of oppositional or kind of like hot takes or dank memes. And this kind of idea of that these people you get into a system where you don't particularly want your ideas to be very accepted or popular. You become kind of more like a cultural critic in the sense that you always want your takes to be hot, you want them to be fiery. And if your takes are always hot and fiery, they're never going to be like generally accepted. Do you have any idea of how we can kind of turn this kind of culture into one which is focused on organizing or anything like this? Or do you think kind of we should just kind of de-emphasize the internet in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was looking at Instagram a lot at that point, and a particular kind of edgelordy type tendency around political memes there. But yeah, I mean, I find there is this kind of strong element of cynicism within the left online, and particularly in left meme culture. And you do often find that there's every kind of attempt to have kind of a cogent thought process is kind of derailed on purpose. And actually, it's very interesting because the book proposes that, and then the book itself was derailed. I don't know if you noticed, but somebody actually made a spoof book that came out 2 weeks before the book came out. So there's a book called The Memeing of Mark Fisher on Amazon. That's not my book, and it was made by an Insta account called Academic Fraud. It's literally one word, Academic Fraud. And he makes sometimes these kind of spoof books, but he never made one that actually took someone's title. So he asked for my PDF. He asked for the PDF of my book weeks before it came out and said, "I'll give you some publicity." But I looked on Amazon at some point and I found like my book with a different cover, and I was like, And I was like, oh, that's cool. Someone's kind of memeing my book. And I was like, oh no, shit, someone's actually just basically put my book out before it's come out. But it didn't have the content of my book. It had a load of Mark Fisher memes in the book. So it's a book full of Mark Fisher memes.
Like a PDF full of memes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a PDF online you can download, and there's a book you can buy with my title that's just full of memes. But anyway, I mean, that's the level to which things, kind of function. That the book is about how left derails, dialogue, and then somebody derailed my book or tried to. Yeah. And I kind of like this, of course. I like the fact that there's this other book. I like the kind of derailing in a way because, it leads to a situation where politicians can't even put across a message, often that it's very hard to control a narrative. And I think that's important.
You talked about Yang Gang, right, in this context?
Yeah, Andrew Yang and his gang, yeah. Andrew Yang.
Before we get into the Yang Gang, I definitely want to get into the Yang Gang thing because the Yang Gang sadly infected some of my family. They became part of the Yang Gang. They were jumped in and they're still in. Sad to say, I still have some family that's been jumped into the Yang Gang. It's like being a Crip.
So they're forward party now, not left, not right, but forward.
They're once you're in for life, and you got to. There's only one way out of the Yang Gang.
You got to do some math. You need to be subtracted.
But I to kind of stay on this topic of the online left. One thing, and we were saying this off air, and as I'm reading your book, I'm also writing something around the same, just totally coincidentally. And there's a term that we're hearing quite often online is that someone's a grifter. You said something I didn't like, and you said you were a revolutionary, and now I don't think you're a revolutionary. And it seems as if we have an audience online that is looking for someone to be their savior. In the mainstream political world, we're constantly looking at the next elected official to save us from ourselves. Online is no different, in my opinion. The next major personality is going to lead the revolution to end capitalism. I don't know where that's ever happened before. I don't remember Walter Cronkite leading the revolution. I don't remember Dan Rather leading the revolution, but for some reason, some online personality is to lead us to the revolution. And I'm seeing what these cats are doing now is to give themselves some sort of revolutionary activist bona fides, because no one wants to be called an influencer. I think to call these people what they are, which is just internet influencers, is a pejorative. But what they do is they may even have a march or what else do they call it, Marcus? Direct action. We're going to have some direct action to get us healthcare for all. And, there really isn't a lot of real planning involved. You see more of a connection to their Patreon than you see to actually getting people towards whatever the end goal is. It just becomes an influencer parade, right? It's like, I'm going to stream my direct action, which is an influencer parade of anger and outrage. And that then becomes their stripes, if you will. Like, I'm a real activist. I led the March for Change online.
Dreamed.
I mean, it's tricky. I mean, you just described, most of the people we know, or what are we doing if we're not like doing that? We just don't have the following. We don't have the following to make a march happen. But I mean, it's not what we should be doing. It's a very tricky thing. I mean, where is this all going? I mean, it's almost like the activists. Well, I mean, because there's a lot of activism going on still, so I shouldn't say that. But a part of activism and the academic left have migrated online, and it's a bit like a part of activism has migrated into art galleries as well. And in a way, the online left is the new academic who writes about Marx to avoid having to actually do anything, in a revolutionary sense. And I think everyone's acutely aware of it. If we speak to Doug or Ben Burgess or whoever, they all say, yeah, that's kind of what's happening. I mean, there are different takes, but I think in a way we do have to say, hey, people, don't just watch us, go and join your local whatever group, however you want to get involved. I don't want to say how you should get involved, but, join a local left group. But I don't know. What I'm not quite sure of, because what was your angle? Even that's not going to work.
It's, we've never fooled ourselves. Like, there's actually real activists I know that don't come on this show, because there is something to be said about real activists coming on podcasts, because they get shit on by other real activists, because you're supposed to be out there doing activist shit, which is like organizing and planning and doing whatever it is that you have planned to do. And you can't do that when you're sitting around pontificating on when the revolution is going to come on some jerk-off's podcast. And sometimes that jerk-off is me. And in some of our conversations that we've had, they kind of look at a lot of the people here as not a lot of some of the bigger names that do think they are doing something somewhat revolutionary as foolish. I do think there's something to be said about trying to give some sort of political education. I mean, that's definitely what Pascal and I try to do here. But we never fool ourselves into thinking that, just watching this show is going to end capitalism. Like, this is part of a much bigger puzzle. And also, we do come from like doing real on the ground work. I come from actually working with the unhoused and the mentally ill. Marcus actually goes and does work or he did before he moved, in prisons. Stefan literally left his country to go fight overseas. So all of us have
I left my country too to fight overseas. It just happened to be for Empire. Yeah, so can we? It was just Veterans Day. I have yet to be thanked. This is a problem.
I thanked you, Marcus, and I can't show you the image that I played, but I did put an image of what you were doing. Did you see that?
No.
Mark? Okay, good.
Oh God, what'd you do to me?
I did. It was horrible. Don't worry about it. These aren't the droids you're looking for. But there's something to be said about, political education, or even like deeper dive conversations into things that, get people aware of certain problems that maybe they weren't aware of before, or maybe certain situations that we should be like pushing for. And I don't even see that in a lot of this online discourse. I just see outrage. I just see anger, and I just hear the same things over and over again. America bad. Democrats or progressives aren't doing enough, and we need revolution now.
General strike now.
General strike now. Yeah, there was a huge. I shouldn't say huge. I don't know how many people watched it, but there was a group of online leftists that had a quote unquote general strike summit, which was a parade of podcasters for like 6 hours a day for 3 days. And
Jen sent me a video where one of them was threatening to kill that streamer with more money than them. I forget his name. He's handsome.
I don't know if this is. Of course, your book was finished by the time this happened, but I don't know if this kind of stuff is on your radar, Mike, because it blew my mind. Because here we are in this moment where there's literally not just a war on labor, but we're slowly seeing labor try to regain some, especially in the States. I can't speak for the UK where you are, but especially in the States, we're seeing labor try to regain some of the mighty losses that it's had over the last 50 years. And to say something like, we're going to have a general strike. It's like, do you understand there's like at will work states here where you can get fired for just saying the word strike? Do you have an infrastructure?
People asking for a strike before they have a union, which is like, okay, cool.
So how is this online left that has so many followers, and that, as we say, it's more of an influencer culture than anything else? How are they just so intellectually tone deaf that they don't understand kind of the dangers of the words they're using?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the Frankfurt School are useful. Going back to this thing I said earlier, that they never really argued from a position of strength. They were more arguing from the position that, you know, we're basically in a really bad place. And then that's really where Mark Fisher was coming from. I mean, being personally in a bad place, you know, because he stated it, that he suffered depression. So, you know, we can appreciate that. But also that societally, you know, there is no way out, which is literally what his book, Capitalism, was about. I almost think, you know, that's why Vaporwave is somehow useful. It was very cynical. It was very silly. You know, nothing was really coming out of there. But in a way, when there's nothing coming out, maybe you need to just throw everything in the air more, and see what kind of lands. But the thing there is, I mean, you risk getting horribly nihilistic, and that is where the right wing are. They're kind of doing that a bit better than we are. And, you know, I think Mark Fisher's last unfinished work, Acid Communism, he does kind of point to, you know, through the word acid. So he wrote this book called Acid Communism, about a movement he proposed called Acid Communism. So you immediately get into, okay, acid, that must mean kind of throwing everything up in the air, or you know, or you know, letting go of any logic and seeing where we get through that. And you know, I think there are big parallels between that actually and what the Frankfurt School proposed, particularly Herbert Marcuse, who he talks about in that unfinished book. And Herbert Marcuse in the late 60s and early 70s in America sort of took some of Adorno's ideas, but made them kind of more radical in a kind of street sense, and worked a bit with Angela Davis as an activist, and said what we need is a great refusal. We need to kind of get the unemployed, the student movement, and immigrants all together, and we need to kind of make a mass street movement. And he proposed that, you know, there should be kind of art happenings mixed in with this. It was very much linked in with the kind of psychedelic movement and kind of 60s counterculture. And I think there is something to be said for all of that. I just think that, yeah, I agree with what's just been said, the question that was put, you know, what are we doing and we're not being irresponsible? I think, yeah, we are. And I think we need to be a bit more like far out. I mean, I run a platform called the Acid Left. We have a YouTube and Instagram and stuff. We do a lot of talks around left counterculture, art and politics, etc. And we don't really propose anything very useful either. That's kind of mostly what we talk about, is that we, you know, how do we get through this impasse? But we do, you know, we do propose very much using creativity, abstraction, a kind of psychedelics, but I don't actually really do any drugs myself now.
See,
but
now you're losing credibility. We need.
Yeah, but okay. But I do have sometimes like just random experiences. You know, I just like see stuff. I actually don't see stuff, but I mean, I think, you know, one can have the full kind of psychedelic experience without even taking psychedelics. There are spiritual experiences which do a similar thing. That you know, what it's about is it's about breaking down our boundaries. And then Adorno says again that the big problem we have is that we try to control nature and each other by identifying things, by measuring them, by categorizing them. And so the way through that is to not identify what he calls this identifying. He calls it identity thinking. So he opposes to that non-identity thinking. So we need to not identify. We need to somehow get rid of our boundaries. And he talks about abstract art and how, when listening to a piece of music, let's think about like trance music, Pink Floyd, something we can relate to, either smoking pot or not, you know. But there's that point when you're listening to music, you kind of float away a bit. You're no longer thinking about your edges. You're no longer thinking about you and the world, or doing your shopping or work or whatever. And Adorno says that moment is crucial because it gives us an example of, you know, of reality. It kind of points us to the fact that we are part of what he called a natural object of the outside. And that's what psychedelic experience does as well. And it's exemplary. It won't in itself solve anything, but, you know, people have trips and they're like, you know, now I've seen the light. And then maybe they do then try and change their life a bit and do something with that. So I think, you know, we can be using these kind of experiences. And of course, the psychedelic thing, we're not going to sell to everyone. So this is where it's kind of, risky, because we can't build a movement on acid if we want to appeal to pensioners and, families and stuff.
Well, I mean, it's not even that popular of a drug. Like, it's not even the most popular drug.
Exactly, yeah.
More
But I think the great thing with acid communism, the unfinished book and the introduction features in a compendium of Fisher writings, but it's also online. You can just Google Introduction to Acid Communism. You can see, where he started out. And the great thing is that there's one bit where he talks about the experience of a family holiday in the 60s or 70s, not his own family holiday. I think it's just describing the fact that, working class families could have holidays. And then you realize that, he's not all about acid and counterculture, that he's about people coming together. And I think that's important. I think we do need to kind of like leverage something out of a generation who really wants a kind of 60s style counterculture for our time. Certainly that, that is kind of, that's something that I think we could kind of like create, and people will want it. But, he's also talking about generally, creating community, and the fact that community once existed, in Britain and other countries with strong welfare states, but that's being whittled away.
It's been detonated.
Now, I got a question, says something that you had mentioned before, and kind of like the utility of media, or at least even like left media, at most, getting people to like envision something greater, a little bit further than that, actually tie into something like in real life. And I guess I wonder too, is like what, we're like we're in the U.S. most most of the people, but yourself and Stefan in the UK, and I wonder if there's a similar thing where there's a large amount of different groups that seem to be kind of like moving in a similar direction, but actually like the lack of cohesive structure or cohesive movement, may not even necessarily structure, just like cohesiveness among these different groups, might be a good goal, or a useful thing of the online left, of just like tying into the art and the possibility of unifying some of these groups that have been some divided on like old leftist sectarian lines, but this is something that like the left is really good at, is actually like picking apart why you shouldn't join these certain groups, instead of, hey, maybe let's be able to hash out some of these things with a meme, but not discredit them. Because I think this may be just human nature of like taking a critique is always very tough.
I mean, I'm actually in Finland, which I should have said by now, because a couple of times people said that I'm in the UK. I am from the UK. I'm from the UK and always follow UK politics. But I'm here in Finland via Italy, where I lived for 10 years. But that's given me a fairly good overview. And I mean, these kind of populist right movements are everywhere. And I think one thing is where you talk about lots of different movements, on the left and elsewhere. None of them seem to be as effective at capturing the public imagination now in terms of like being rebels than the populist right. And they seem to have like really like forged ahead in the madness terms. There is like an acid right. We're having trouble getting an acid communist movement going, but there's like a really far out right movement. Like, so when you saw, is it January the 6th? How do you call it? 1661.
January 6th, thanks to name.
Yeah,
storming of the Capitol.
It's 9/11 times 10 here now.
Yeah, it's the storming of the Capitol. That was it an inside job though? Is it 9/11 like that? Is there a conspiracy? Is there a 1/6?
I mean, with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert,
1/6 truther movement, and it's Doug Lane in it. That's just a joke, because Doug Lane was like big into. I think Doug Lane was once a truther, but many people were. But the January the 6th or whatever you call it, yeah, that thing, didn't that just look really impressive at the time, like as it was happening? Obviously we saw it at the same time everywhere, I guess, live on TV. It's like, shit, how come they're doing that and
I
not
loved
us?
it. It was great. I mean, it was so funny. It was amazing.
we were streaming it live.
Oh, sick.
Like, yeah, we were like literally like watching and commentating, and like not honestly, like just kind of like jaw drop, like holy shit, they're doing
But,
it.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think you're thinking
And
of
there
this
was that,
shaman guy, right?
That shaman guy was so annoying because it's like, shit, like that does look kind of impressive, even though like, he's obviously, a twat. But I mean, well, he's now in prison, isn't he?
Yeah, he got like 31 months, which seems a bit harsh. Kind of
I mean,
41. Yeah.
41. Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very difficult one to weigh in on that one, whether it's harsh or not. I suppose, yeah. As most people didn't get sentences, then yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the
but-
thing with me is like, there's only probably like 3 or 4 Congress people I'd care if they died. So it was kind of like, I didn't really see the harm.
I mean, and it probably will make him, more popular for sure. But the thing is, like, we have these.
Did you talk about QAnon?
Sorry.
Did you want to talk about QAnon?
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The populist right seem to be forging ahead in this sense, and this is something I talk about in the book actually, because there are big parallels between QAnon and the way that Horkheimer and Adorno talk about the Nazis in the 1930s and 40s. Because I said earlier, they wrote a book called The Dialectic of Enlightenment, where they discussed their experience of Nazi Germany and also of democracy in America. And basically, they say that there's this process whereby people, in fearing death and in fearing nature, people kind of become very rigid in their posture and in their behavior and in their moral kind of codes and stuff. So this is how people end up kind of developing these perverse kind of opinions. That the first thing is that they go through a process of almost rigor mortis, that people get really tense under pressure. And then from that, because they can't get any more tense, they then they project their hate outwards. So there's this kind of process which is individual, but when you have something like an economic depression, it becomes like a mass thing. So you get a lot of people becoming very tense, almost playing dead. So I guess it's a moment of inaction politically, but then they somehow end up having to purge themselves. So their main kind of fear as humans is of death, obviously. And what do we associate with death? Like mostly as a visceral kind of physical, tangible thing, is uncleanliness or dirtiness. So this is where you get the projection outside of dirtiness, of death, onto another. So for Adorno and Horkheimer, the Jews in Nazi Germany end up getting scapegoated in this way. So I think you see a very similar thing happening with QAnon. So you see how this is possible, that people end up, mass people end up coming up with these kind of fantasies and then scapegoating people. But also, interestingly, Nazi Germany, the Nazi Party, had all these kind of weird backstories, and backstories that grew out of Nazism that weren't official, that are very much like QAnon, blood drinking, Satanism, etc. Yeah. So this just seems to be something that is innate. So when you ask, like, how is it that people come up with such crazy shit? It's not so much that as they're coming up with it because there's a human propensity to do this. Out of fear, to create these kind of enemies and stuff. And the left just get kind of sidetracked. They don't know what to do with any of this because it's not in the left's nature to develop, conspiracies involving blood drinking Satanists and then scapegoating foreigners.
I mean, also with QAnon, right? It became very popular because there was this one guy, Q, who posted all this stuff, and you can't really imagine that happening so much with the left, with everyone kind of following this one character and sticking with them.
Yeah, and if I could real quick, in your chapter, The Work of Art in the Age of Subscription Economy, you write in regards to Walter Benjamin's writings about fascism, and I quote, as insignificant as appearing on a newsreel as a passerby may now seem, this experience potentially opened the role of muse and protagonists previously reserved for the wealthy and the mystic or biblical figures to anyone, in turn leading to enormous expectations, only subdued by channeling the energy of the mass into an adoration of the nationalist leader, coupled with scapegoating of racial minorities. Nonetheless, the media forms that today encourage ambition in the masses also offer the possibility to become famous and or wealthy to an unprecedented extent. This is the world we live in, where anyone with a broadband connection, even from Mexico, and an $80 ring light can rise to stardom without any sort of qualification. If motivated by the allure of internet stardom and fame, what does this say about the many of smaller content producers, especially with the online left?
Yeah. So yeah, as you just said, as was written in the book, Benjamin basically said that the mass reproduction of images in magazines and films, etc., gave people an appetite for more stuff, more wealth. So at a certain point in the early 1900s, most people probably had like an image of Jesus and Mary or whatever in their house, and maybe a family photo, and that's it. But suddenly, people were seeing like many more things. Aside from the couple of pictures in their house and what they could see in the public library and church, etc. So in seeing all this stuff, paintings, films, etc., they started to want more wealth. So the Nazi party, the fascists in Italy as well, diverted people's desire through propaganda parades, through posters. In Nazi Germany, they gave everyone a radio for their house, and through a kind of desire for conflict. So they encouraged people to want, in Nazi Germany, it was Lebensraum, like living space in the east. So they channeled people's kind of desire for wealth into a desire to take over Poland and Russia, etc. So if you look at today and you look at Instagram, Twitch, etc., there is this kind of very real sense of people seeing that stuff and thinking, I can have stuff too. They get encouraged by looking at Kardashian. They get encouraged by looking at influencers that get given stuff and get rich through Instagram or make money off Twitch. And, it's a parallel situation, but also that we're making choices all the time online. So people think, I should be able to make choices politically. So there you get Trump and Johnson redirecting people's desire for power and wealth, saying, we can build a wall. That feels like an action we can do. Or, let's get out of the EU and then we can take control of our own destinies. So it's a very similar process. But the only thing is, as you just said, where Benjamin says that these, the mass media kind of encourages people to want more stuff. The internet media today encourages people to want more stuff, but also gives people more stuff as never before. But you can't deny that we can get rich and famous through the internet. And the thing is, it's really frustrating for people, is that it happens mostly accidentally. You can't work out who's going to be famous next. So I think that really makes people kind of tense. But the thing is, if we manipulate a few things and use the internet properly, I think it can be a really good thing. So the traditional media kind of critique, based very much on the Frankfurt School, that the media is run by the elite and they're controlling us. Of course, it is true, but not in the sense it was. There is room for kind of turning that round. I don't know how positive you people are, because obviously there was go on I'll stop talking.
In the early 2000s there was like a lot, and I guess the 90s too, of optimism about kind of what the internet and what it can do. And then we went kind of, I think, through a process of kind of real capturing of the internet by corporations. And now especially we kind of, because it's very much hard, there's so much information on the internet, it's kind of hard to manage it for your people, right? But now we have these increasingly powerful algorithms, which they try and make, do the work for them. But of course, these algorithms are still really dumb. And so there's kind of a constant kind of battle between kind of edgy content creator people whose content is on the edges of what gets banned, and these kind of algorithms, and then these few kind of underpaid workers in India who have to look at horrible things all day and decide what to ban. And there's this kind of constant battle. But we're definitely, I think the era of kind of the Wild West of the internet is over, certainly for now.
Yeah, there was that era of positivity. I remember in the 90s. I actually remember, I think you said earlier before we came on that you're a lot younger than the rest of us here. But I recall the late 90s and this kind of thing that, the internet is democratic, the internet lets you look at anything and you can look at stuff all over the world. Therefore, it's kind of a democratic way of organizing information. You don't have to go to a university library, or a public library and order like a book, and it takes weeks to get there. Suddenly we have all this information. So in terms of like left literature, it made so much available suddenly that the very sloppy logic was, because it's kind of democratic in its form, it must lead to more democracy worldwide. And then of course that didn't really happen. It's actually, because it's democratic, anyone can say anything, and they ended up saying really right-wing stuff.
Yeah.
And even the left-wing ones end up arguing and creating problems between each other. So
I think the last big optimism was about the Arab Spring. Obviously, like, not quite directly, but that led to ISIS, right?
It was,
so
yeah. It was.
That was the point. I think the elites were like, "Whoa! Even in the third world, we can't just let the internet run out of control. We need to like put some clampers on it."
I think that was the end of the positivity. Yeah, I think it was first the Iranian Green Revolution that failed, and then not long after it was the Arab Spring. Yeah, for sure, and that just ended up like a real fucking mess. So yeah, I think now we're not so positive, obviously, but it's only after that wave, which was very much oriented around Twitter, that we ended up with the online left as we know it now, with podcasts and YouTube videos, left YouTube videos, to the extent we have today. So, in a way we have more than we ever had, but I think we're just not very positive about where it will end up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really optimistic in general about various things. I think I'm much more optimistic than you in from what I've heard so far, especially in terms of kind of like conventional political strategies. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is kind of the idea of capitalist realism, and whether you still think it's kind of like a totalizing thing we're in now. Because my impression among kind of young people and so on is that we can really imagine an end to capitalism, but we don't have any good imaginations of what will come after. In terms of like, I think there's a big thing of disaster politics at the moment. I think you can see this polling where young people are like terrified of climate change, and so they can imagine the world as it is ending. But I think what they can't imagine is something good that will come next. So we can imagine the end of capitalism, but it kind of becomes the end of the world. And I think on the left, there's also like a big kind of disaster politics approach, where people imagine capitalism ending through the end of the world. It's like climate change is going to blow everything up, and somehow magically the left is going to kind of succeed through that. So I was wondering, I mean, since Mark Fisher wrote, do you think anything's kind of changed with capitalist realism, or do you think it's much the same?
Well, can I add this to the question that you're asking, Mike? In that kind of framework, then is climate change almost like a Cold War type scenario then for young people? If the Cold War was, the fear of not just the spread of communism, but it was a fear of nuclear war, right? That's what we were afraid of. The Russians had nukes.
Yeah, I mean, the first year as to whether I'm negative or more negative than you, I think I like to argue from the negative, because I think if you get into this thing of like, hey, there's an answer, not that you sound like that, but if one does get into that, there's always the risk that we've been duped into thinking there's an answer. So, I think if we argue from the negatives, then we're less likely to get disappointed in a way. I think there have been too many kind of false starts. I think that's how we're going to increasingly see Sanders and Corbyn. So all our hope goes there because we were being positive, and we kind of flunked an opportunity, when there was a growing left. And of course, the growing left was partly because Sanders and Corbyn existed. But in the way in which we put it all, so much of our hope into electoralism, we kind of got duped again. You end up with perhaps a worse situation than before. So I think sometimes it benefits to be negative. But within that, I actually don't think I don't have an entirely negative outlook. When I say like the internet is the best and the worst thing that happened, I think you have to understand that within that you have the best as well as the worst. And Adorno actually said in Dialectic of Enlightenment that the culture industry, what he called mass media, basically, it makes us both intelligent and stupid at once. And I thought that's a really important sentence, because he would basically say, I don't know what the exact quote was, but it's making us the most intelligent and most stupid we've ever been, is kind of the inference. And within that you have the most intelligent. You can't just hang on to the most stupid. And I think this is happening all the time. We have these big advances. I mean, look at where we are now. It's amazing where we are now compared to the 90s in terms of like the injustices that get exposed, the mass movements that can be kind of brought into existence, immediately. And you can't say that they haven't had some kind of impact. I mean, if you're working in media departments during Me Too, I was working in the communications department, which means you're teaching film and other kind of aspects of media. I mean, you very much felt, that you had to address the Me Too movement to your students who were mostly, as it happens, female. And that was going on throughout the industry, throughout the media industry and the art world, because I was working a lot as a critic and curator then. So I saw that. So, attitudes were challenged a bit. I think people were thinking, well, hang on, how should I talk to people? If you're a man, how should I talk to a woman, for example? So, I'm not saying this is everything. I know, of course, there's strong reasons to be kind of, to frown upon IDPOL, identity politics. But, things certainly have changed for the better in some respects through the internet exposing things and the kind of horizontality of the internet. But as for like, where does capitalist realism go now, or has it got worse? Like the literal phenomenon of capitalist realism, there being no alternative. I actually think it's got a bit better, because I think so many things have shifted, and so many things that were certainties before are no longer certainties. I don't want to parrot the Wrzesniewskian line, which got him in a lot of trouble in 2016, that Trump, will be good because he'll unsettle things. But in a way, that kind of has happened. I mean, I wrote something recently. It was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to some things that happened online, which I won't go into. But I talked a little bit about how Doug Lane interviewed a Trump supporter on the Zero Books channel a while back. I don't know if you know that he interviewed this Trump supporter a couple of times, and it looked kind of weird. It looked a bit weird, but then what he said is that I think he realised that we're at a moment where we've got a lot to play out before we're anywhere near socialism, and a lot of people in their frustration at the system are going to gravitate towards Trump, and that's not a good thing at all. But if we don't speak to these people, what hope do we possibly have? Of creating a big socialist movement. And I just think that movement there, the movement is there to be created, seeing the frustrations of people on the ground, much more than it was when Fisher was writing, when he wrote Capitalist Realism in 2008 or 2009 that it came out.
I mean, you obviously saw it last year in the United States. We're kind of in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I mean, I don't know what percentage was, but a massive amount of Zoomers decided, oh yeah, we're just going to come and take over the streets of most major metropolitans.
But it's great that there are all these protests, but it's unfortunate they were all right wing and just so ridiculous over things like wearing masks and things, and that is really disturbing.
I meant the Black Lives Matter thing, but yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Well, that of course, I think exactly, and I'm not in America, so you're right. Yeah, there have been massive left movements that have been really important, as well. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I take that back. But in terms
but obviously
of
you're right in the sense that there was this massive rebellion, but there wasn't a communist party or anything even close to that to kind of direct it to anywhere. There was just kind of attempts by the Democrat Party to capture it, and then that was basically it. Just kind of, it was then just people trying to express themselves, trying to do something, but it had no direction or aim, or it just kind of fizzled out in the end.
Would everyone agree though too? It wasn't really centered in any sort of working class movement.
No.
Well, obviously in the sense that there's no working class movement in the United States. So obviously it could be.
Yeah.
It's like saying it's not centered on the moon.
I think what is true though is that there was a lot of people in the streets, and most of those people were working class people. And was there a mechanism to direct all of those, or a portion of those working class people, into a vehicle that can actually change, our society? And no, right? No. I know one organization that did capitalize off of Black Lives Matter, and that was the Democratic Party. And that's just true. The Democratic Party got more people to sign up for the party during those protests than ever. Without an organization to do that, you know, not to say this has to be some nationwide thing, but like this is just something that should be true, that if you are a part of, you know, a leftist organization and you're trying to reach working class people, a giant mobilization of people literally walking through the streets might be a good place to, I don't know, tie into.
I mean, we were talking to a journalist that covered a lot of the protests in Minneapolis, right? Which is literally the epicenter of where the spring of 2020 jumped off. That's where the police station burned down. That's where originally the city council said they were going to do away with the police, and they didn't. And
I mean, that is like a whole, you could talk about that for hours and hours and hours. How like
they had a 2.5 hour show talking about, you know, what happened and what didn't happen. And certain people that were organizers of those protests actually moved into the electoral politics arena because they saw how their movement, as Marcus said, got co-opted by the larger Democratic Party. And a few of them won city council seats, and the person running for mayor did not win. But one thing that the journalist had pointed out in his writing was that a majority of the people that were protesting were apolitical.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, kind of the big issue that we have here. You have a lot of these people that are mad and frustrated for, you know, numerous reasons. The lockdown had a lot to do with the protests of 2020. Racist rhetoric from fucking wannabe fascist leaders had a lot to do with the reason why people, you know, en masse were tearing shit up in 2020, because this isn't the first time someone's been killed on camera. I mean, in that same area, let's remember a young man with a permit for a gun was murdered on live stream on Facebook, and the city did not burn. And he wasn't the only person to die that year in the Twin Cities. So let's put all this into perspective. There were a lot of factors, I think, that led into those protests that made people so angry. It's just who was really the big winner at the end of the day. Content creators got super chat dollars talking about it as ad nauseum. The Democratic Party came up with the fear of Trump. You know, here in the States, the fear of Trump radicalized the libs to go out and vote in record numbers.
Yeah, and to lose follow-on elections.
and that's where this whole thing kind of, I don't want to say scares me, but how do we, back to my original point, how do we take something like memeing, which Stefan, you know, got to do for the cause? How do we take that and actually make it work for the left and not have it be co-opted?
Yeah, what I go into in the book is I talk about Walter Benjamin a bit, and I talk about something he used to do, which he used to basically smoke hash and go and walk around shopping arcades in Paris in the 1930s. So when he fled Germany, he went to Paris, and he hung out there until he had to then try and flee again when the Nazis came into France. But anyway, he spent a period of time in Paris. Actually, I think he was there even before Nazi rule. And he works on a project called the Arcades Project. And what he basically did is, again, got high and walked around the arcades, following the kind of pathway and behavioral traits and habits of what were called the Flanners of the 1800s. So you probably heard about Flanners. They were middle class, kind of upper bourgeois, often children of industrialists in Paris, who used to have nothing better to do than just kind of walk around dressed very sharply. And they're walking around dressed very sharply. They're kind of like mall rats, but, very rich mall rats. Or mall rats are like, working class Flanners. they basically, because they had nothing to do, but walk around. They just used to walk around looking good. And Benjamin kind of thought that he could maybe retrace their steps, and in retracing their steps, better understand the 1800s, and therefore better understand this kind of explosion of industrial capitalism and how that led to the conditions of capitalism in the 1920s and 30s. So he was kind of doing a excavation of capitalism through these daily walks. And what he did as he was walking through these arcades is he would kind of look at things like the architecture of these covered arcades, which were made in the 1800s, and kind of look at that and compare that, or kind of juxtapose that with the stuff he saw on sale. So it's like now going to an out-of-town shopping centre and getting high and looking at the kind of prefabricated crappy architecture of the shopping centre, and then looking at the stuff on sale. And he would in doing this he would create what he called constellations of objects. And he said that you could better understand the history of capitalism and how we got where we are now back then in the 30s by putting together disparate objects, because he basically believed that capitalism in history was kind of an explosion from a point of harmony. The whole of history is like the explosion of a perfect whole, which in a way it kind of is if you take in the Big Bang theory. I'm not sure how correct the Big Bang theory now is if you look into quantum physics and stuff, but anyway, he was going more on Jewish mysticism. But anyway, he took history to be a kind of explosion, and our position as being people looking back on the fragmented kind of piled up rubbish of history, and our job being to kind of take that debris and put it back together in new forms. So his kind of walking around stones and arcades was part of that, taking things, making new constellations, and in doing that, better understanding where they came from and then working out where to go from there. So what I say is that we're a bit like Flanners today, in the West. Even if we are not very rich ourselves, we are hugely privileged, both historically and globally. And we spend a lot of our time looking at memes and making podcasts and looking at each other's podcasts. We are bringing together constellations of media objects. So I talk about some memes and how you might, put together some kind of different meme tendencies. And then, from the absurdity that arises, because I think if you put anything together on the internet, if you put a constellation of 5 media objects, i.e. 5 memes, podcasts, tweets, whatever, you're going to end up with something pretty horrific. So in doing that, looking at this monster that you've got in front of you, you're going to then go, oh, that's disgusting. And then you're going to try and backwards engineer it to work out how the hell we ended up, here with these perverse memes. And why are we sitting here looking at them, as leftists claiming we want revolution and actually just kind of pissing around a lot of the time.
Have you heard of a very similar thing the Situationists did in Paris?
And I think they were very influenced. I'm not really influenced by, but certainly you could draw a lineage back to Flannerism.
For the audience, what the Situationists do, they drink a few bottles of red wine while on the subway going to the furthest out station in Paris. And then completely drunk, they try and proceed from that last station back to the center of Paris. And this is part of kind of trying to understand the psychic geography of the city, which they called psychogeography, and trying to get a grasp really of the city, not the one that was on the maps, but in its constitutive feature. So that kind of when you had some kind of uprising in the city, you'd have an understanding of the city which was different and better in some ways than kind of the state planners did and the military forces who had these maps.
Didn't they call that the derive?
Yeah.
The derive. We've done some work on that on the Acid Left YouTube channel, and we actually looked at this app, what's it called? Psychonauts?
The game.
No, hang on. Randonautica. Randonautica is Nautica being from nautical, how do you call it? Mapping your way out through territories.
Right.
This app called Randonautica, basically you go on it and it apparently it has a quantum random number generator, and it randomly generates coordinates. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to go on it, and you're supposed to think of an objective idea, like thing that you hold in your mind, question, whatever. And apparently there's something about quantumly generated randomness that when combined with thought will throw up weird coincidences. So there's been all these situations where people have used the Randonautica app, and they've ended up like being taken to weird places. So basically,
it just sends them home.
You generate kind of a map, and you go there. Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be a good one. It's probably happened. I mean, but there's been weird stuff like people finding, some teenagers found a body in a suitcase. That was really obviously controversial. But there's been like a lot of flack directed at the people who made this app. People saying that they deliberately programmed like dark shit to happen and whatever. Also, people just having a lot of coincidences happen. But it's an interesting, way of. I haven't actually tried it. I'm too scared. Adam from the Acid Left, he tried it, and we had the CEO on there, and he told us loads of crazy shit as well. And he really believes that this process of randomly generating numbers using a quantum random generator does actually link up with thoughts and can create weird coincidences. But that would be an interesting way of getting people thinking in different ways, and that's the kind of abstraction I'm thinking of. Like, where can the internet send you off on a weird trip? Where can how can we engineer kind of weirdness in our lives that can maybe?
It's interesting to think now that, I mean, I was kind of at the edge of it, but back in the day, or so I've heard, on the internet, obviously you didn't go. Now you go to about 10 different websites, right? So the internet is kind of the infinite number of different places you could go. Is actually, in fact, not much more diverse than, well, it's less diverse than my grandma's TV. Like, she has about 30, 40, 50 channels, while the average kind of internet user now goes to about 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 websites. But earlier in the internet's history, that wasn't the case. You just go to loads of fucking random different websites. I remember also in school being like told to go like to Penn Island or whatever, and just these are the various places where kind of like you'd see horrifying things. And this was definitely a thing when I was younger. Like, for instance, when I was very young going on 4chan and stuff, you'd end up on really fucking weird places. But I think this isn't so much of a thing right now because we're kind of trapped in kind of like a Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Twitch, which all just link to each other and don't kind of link externally, or they do to a very small degree.
Yeah, and it is hideous, and everyone ends up arguing with each other, and the left are the meanest. I always get trolled by leftists, not rightists, and I think, in a way, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I think it just says something about the left, I mean, I don't know if I'd rather be trolled by rightists or not. I think, would I be doing something better? Would that make me a better leftist if I was being trolled by rightists? I don't know. Maybe it would. I don't know.
I think online, though, it's like, in order to be trolled by people on the right, you either have to like go viral to the point where they're seeing these things in their circles, or you have to go and like literally troll them, and then they get back.
Yeah. You guys follow called Beja? I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I don't think so.
Well, he's like some Jacobin person who also just randomly does stuff which pisses off the right. And he did a thing like where he pretended that he was giving out masks instead of sweets on Halloween, and that got like thousands and thousands and thousands of angry retweets from rightists, like famous people. I don't really know what it gains or if it helps anything in any way, but it was definitely funny. Like then it went on to Reddit and stuff and did this thing where everyone was taking him completely seriously that he actually did this. But I don't know. I don't think that helps anything. But maybe it got some more followers.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious of like, Mike, what do you even do with the trolls? Do you block them, ignore them? Do you quote tweet and dunk on them?
I don't. I do. I tend to ignore them, actually. I mean, there is a little story actually that relates to the book, and I'm just going to show you the book because it relates to the title and cover. So this got tweeted by Doug Lane on the Zero Books Twitter in around July, and it just got like several hundred retweets and hate messages, as well as several hundred likes as well. And people were like saying, "Oh, but you can't have a book on memes and Fisher." And then you can't even have a book on memes, and then you can't have a book with a meme on the cover. And, it was a number of things happening, but it was some people who were gatekeeping Mark Fisher. There's a whole history of that coming from a different publisher, etc. I won't go into it in much depth. But there were a lot of people who were just upset that it has memes on it. So I was getting attacked because the book has memes, and then they were like, it's clickbaity. But it's like, well, what the fuck do you expect? Sorry, excuse my French. What do you expect a book to be on the cover other than clickbait, in a sense? If not clickbaity, you're trying to get people to buy your book, But okay, so the meme there is the famous "Are you winning, son?" meme, and it has Adorno in the doorway from the Frankfurt School. Hang on, how do I do that? Adorno over here, and basically the original meme is a dad coming in the doorway and saying, "Are you winning, son?" And the son on the computer is actually playing kind of a sex game, like alien sex game or something. I don't know what game it is, but he's not playing a game in the sense that you can win it. So the dad's got it all wrong. So it's like a boomer moment. And here, instead of him playing like this alien sex game, like more tastefully, I've got him making a Mark Fisher meme, and that's me redrawing a existing Mark Fisher Wojak. I've actually redrawn all of this myself in it's actually Photoshop, but it looks like MS Paint. But so anyway, people got quite upset by this. And yeah, the title is a memeing of Mark Fisher, as you know, anyway, but even the title got people upset. So this got me trolled for months. And then, that kind of stopped. And then somebody made a spoof copy of my book, which I mentioned earlier. So this other memeing of Mark Fisher came out. But that was like the people tweeting me before, well, obviously a Twitter crowd. And they were saying like really hideous stuff. I wouldn't even go into, but there were even death threats because of this book cover. Then the people who made the spoof book were on Instagram. And so what basically happened is the people on Twitter were saying, you can't make a book about memes, but the people on Instagram really effectively, when they put out a book full of Mark Fisher memes called The Memeing of Mark Fisher, they were saying the opposite. They were saying it should be us making a book about Mark Fisher memes. You see what I mean? It goes from you can't do that to, you can't do it, we should be doing it.
I was going to make fun of Mike for explaining the meme, but then everyone kept dying of laughter. So. But
I did duck most of it. I never actually got annoyed at the person who made the spoof book. There's a guy who keeps trolling me on his blog, who just says ridiculous stuff about me that's not even true, who's actually a theorist of Mark Fisher too. But I just ignore him on the whole. I think the best way is to ignore all these people, and I think it's helped sell the book, because actually if you go on Amazon, it says like, where it says like people who bought this also bought this. The other memeing of Mark Fisher, the spoof one, it says that they also bought my book.
Yeah.
So they both of them together, but also on mine, in some countries, it says people who bought Mike Watson's memeing of Mark Fisher also bought Academic Fraud's memeing of Mark Fisher. So it's going both ways. But I've seen the sales figures, and they're better than my previous book. So I think it may have helped. The trolling may have helped.
Nice.
Just checking now.
Like when you say, "Hey, it's the internet's the best and worst thing," you got right there. You got
exactly,
you got a little mix of both.
But this kind of madness is what I'm talking about in the book, and the way it's impossible to have like any kind of rational discussion. And then the same thing has been applied to my book, and I can't be that surprised. It is weird when someone puts out a book with the name of your book. It feels like someone's like mimicking you.
In the hip hop world, you'd bust a cap on somebody for that shit.
Yeah. I was saying to people, were like, oh yeah, well, it's probably good for you. And okay, I've taken it pretty well, but privately I was saying to people, this is pretty weird. And a lot of my friends are artists, like contemporary. I don't say that in a way that I'm proud. But, a lot of my friends are contemporary artists, and I was like, they make sculptures and painting and shit. And I was like, but what if someone like made one of your paintings, copied it, and presented it and they just put it in the show and say, I'm having a Jaakko Mattila show, I'm having a James Walton show or whatever the fuck. And this guy would be upset. He'd be like, what the fuck? So of course, on a very personal, like ontological level, I was feeling somebody was mimicking me, and it was uncomfortable in a way. But on some kind of more professional level and internet, like persona level, I haven't showed annoyance. I'm not that annoyed. And now I'm happy because it's selling.
You're still an artist, and there's still a code about biting. I mean, you can't bite people's shit. And
Well, that's true, yeah. But I suppose like they memed it in a way. So it's like, well, the book's about memes. I have to be able to take on board somebody memeing my book, albeit in a very kind of real sense.
Yeah.
you might be able to get fucked up over that. I don't know.
But I don't know. I feel like that's like the best way to take it.
Of course, I was like there was some agitation expressed privately, but I think we were trying to work out, to what degree are they prepared to keep winding us up? To what degree is this a silly spoof? To what degree are they out to get us? We had to kind of work out what was really going on. And there are kind of somebody who's actually on the credits of the book. How do you call them? The credits, when people say some nice stuff about your book.
The little blurbs on the back.
Yeah, endorsements and blurbs. Yeah, it appears that somebody who endorsed it was heavily involved in the spoof as well. So that's all weird. But I won't go into more details.
I don't know, but I think I'd really love if this happened to me.
You love it until it happens, right? And then
probably, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think it depends on were they good memes in the book?
Well, they were good memes, but one thing, another thing is that 2 of the memes are mine in that book.
Hey, all right.
So even on that basis,
like 2% royalties.
Yeah, you might have to go fuck somebody up. It's okay, Mike. Like if we read it in the newspaper or like in some sort of like tweet, like Mike Watson fucked up dude that memed his book, then we'd be like, oh, we understand.
Yeah, but I'm not. I think this person's in the States, so I would need other people to fuck them up. And I've been looking for a few people in the States.
Which, I mean, I've made a few memes. I don't know if they've ever made it into a book. I watched one of your shows where you guys were going through like a Reddit list, and like it was about like memes and stuff like that. And I was like, come on, Left Flank, you can be in there. We weren't in there. But when I see one of my memes somewhere else on the internet, I go through the roof. That is like the greatest moments is when like a meme that I made months ago somehow pops up again on some like Facebook page or some shit like that, and I'm like, hell yeah, this is me winning. No one knows what the hell is going on, but I'm winning right now.
Mike, have you seen, this might be something you're very interested in, have you seen the massive growth of the subreddit anti-work?
I have, yeah, but actually I did a stream on it yesterday.
That's the one I was watching. Yeah.
I was with Adam yesterday. We did this on the Acid Left, our channel. We did a stream. We just looked through anti-work, and I found it really interesting. Yeah, I think the memes. What was really interesting was the memes were quite kind of lowest common denominator, i.e. bog standard memes. They weren't very good memes,
I mean, that's what I was saying to you before about
but they were effective. But they were effective. Like obviously, people. I mean, there's 1 million people on that subreddit, and people are really kind of getting into the subject of basically socialism via no work. I mean, there must be a lot of people on that subreddit that aren't really socialists, but will be exposed to.
Well, interesting thing about that, when I was researching incels, you can do this thing where you do subreddit mapping, where there's this website which shows you all the associations between different subreddits. And unlike what maybe you'd expect, where incel things just kind of link to other incels things and misogynistic stuff, it linked to subreddits like anti-work. So I think, yeah, you're right that anti-work as a subreddit kind of took in kind of dissatisfied people from all these different places, and hopefully they kind of generally being pointed in a good direction now.
For sure, yeah. I find the anti-work thing interesting anyhow. But as I said yesterday on that stream, I'm a little concerned. I mean, I think Marx was really setting up work as the one asset the working class have, which they can use as leverage. So if you don't have work anymore, what do you use to put the fighters up the ruling class?
And on that note, we've gone on longer than Mike knew he was going to be on for. On Saturdays, we always lie to the guests and say, oh, no, we go for like 30, 45 minutes. You're fine.
Well, it's like a tight hour.
then an hour and a half later, sometimes 3 hours later, Stefan's been on a few of those marathon 3-hour shows, right? Did I get kicked off again?
No, you're here.
Oh, I'm here?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, no one can hear me?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
everyone's so like quiet. And keep in mind the whole
Well,
time.
I was just thinking about the time you came on my stream and we went for 6 hours.
We did it. We pulled a we did a 6-hour thing.
Which-
Can we get Mike back on the show with Alex from the Alpha Bunga Bunga podcast?
That would be good. I spoke to him before. I've been on his podcast.
That I think would be a very good show.
I think we probably have quite different opinions. I don't know where he stands on anti-work.
I mean, I think I've got very different opinions to you, Mike. I just haven't.
Well, yeah, well, it's true. No, I mean, it could be an interesting disagreement. I mean, when he hosted me, he couldn't disagree with me very much. But maybe we could disagree more openly.
Well, I don't want to have a debate show. I just meant to have a good conversation. I don't want to have like,
oh yeah,
super smash it out, bam.
We won't do fighting, but on anti-work though, I'm the only one who lives in a country with a decent welfare system, i.e. Finland. And I'm really not into anti-work, but actually I'm the only one of us who probably doesn't have to work that much because there's a decent welfare system. But yeah, sorry, because I was going through that with Adam yesterday. Adam's in Florida and he works really a shitload, whereas I have my back covered by the state rather a lot more.
You can flounce around being an artist.
Yep, or a memester.
I mean, I'm a grad student, so like I'm not exactly, my nose is not to the grindstone.
Okay,
memester sounds like a memeing gangster. That's what a memester is.
Well, so and I guess I gotta say I'm kind of lucky, just because in the United States it's like what's the alien movie, Starship Troopers?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where service guarantees citizenship. So I get a little bit of disability that helps take the edge off of this capitalist nightmare. So it's not bad. Probably not Finland good, but
I mean, it's good. So, well, I mean, right now I am the principal carer for my baby, and that my girlfriend's working. She teaches till 2 p.m. every day. So I take the baby carer allowance, and I say I take it. I mean, I also actually look after the baby.
can you just real quick describe what the baby care allowance is? Because like this is something like a policy thing that I talk about.
If I had a baby care allowance, my ass would still be in the state.
One parent for it's like something like eight months. Like one parent, and you can transfer it from one to the other at different points, gets an allowance to be at home and look after the baby. You know, obviously I also go out, you know, my girlfriend gets back and I go and do work elsewhere. But it's not like, obviously it's not loads of money. It's probably like around about $1,000 or something. But I also freelance as well. But if you're a freelancer here, if you're not, basically, if you don't have a contract, like I think of over 25 hours a week, you're entitled to several €100 a month. So if you're a freelancer here and you don't have a contract, you're always just getting given money just for existing. It's almost like a universal basic income, but it's basically an unemployment benefit that gets taken away once you earn over a certain amount or do over a certain amount of hours. But generally, you always still get given something every month. So, you know, that is the closest to UBI I've ever experienced. And it's really good. But my point was that on an abstract level, I don't know that I think no work is like a good basis for the left.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, but it kind of the thing isn't either not what we think about it won't change what happens, right? Either we'll have like a massive unemployed kind of population, or capital will adapt in some way. So the question is rather what the concessions are coming and what do we do with them? Obviously, what the left does isn't going to change like by 5% how many people are employed or unemployed.
No, I suppose like there's the thinking that automation will lead to the necessity of having a UBI, and I just don't know if that will happen. I don't know if it will be like that. There will be like a permanent universal basic income and a whole class of people who just get to do what they want. I don't think unless we have socialism first, that's not going to happen, because the ruling elite are going to see a load of just superfluous people, and I don't know, either like getting them working as sex slaves or whatever, or just top them
Well,
up.
servants, I think, will be the big thing. That's what we're really getting into now, where you can have people like go to Tesco for you and buy your shopping and come back to you, which is obviously useful for disabled people. But I think there'll be an immense plethora of all these apps which you can basically use people as servants for, like to do calls.
They
for
have
you
it
and
now.
kind of stuff, like to be your personal assistant, but paid slave wages, and you don't have any personal connections.
Postmates. That's ultimately what Post. I don't know if you guys have Postmates in UK or Europe. That's ultimately what Postmates was designed to do. I mean, I do agree with the not just gigification, but the idea of what is it called? It's got a name. Revolving revenue models. So remember, Mike, back in the day, you bought Microsoft Word, that was it. You bought Adobe, that was it. You bought Logic, that was it. Now everything is a monthly pay.
Oh yeah, that's how Patreon and all this leftist stuff works too, right? People will, for whatever reason, they love to pay subscriptions.
But there's a difference between, let's say, Patreon and Netflix, right? Then there is between me having to pay for a monthly subscription fee for something I would pay up front for. Before, I paid up front for a service like Word. I need it to write and edit the things that I have to write and edit, and I never paid monthly for it. And now I have to pay monthly for it. And there's all kinds of there's a teleprompter app that I have to pay monthly for, that maybe 5-6 years ago I just would have bought the teleprompter app. Now I'm charged $7 or whatever it is a month for this thing. So it's about $84 a year. I'd pay $84 a year for that. And the new features that always come out aren't things that are really usable, but it's collecting constant data from me. It's got revolving revenue, so it can forecast a little bit better financially when it's.
And is this not though just like a kind of like
Jason, if you're paying for Word, we can definitely sort that out. We can stop that. Like, you shouldn't be paying for fucking Word. Like, come on, I know you're old, but like, we can sort that out. Like,
but I think, and isn't that though just like kind of like, that's just capitalism realizing, because like the critique of like, oh hey, these fucking youngsters are wasting all of their money on these like $7.99 lattes and shit like that. I mean, at the end of the day, like, companies figured out, hey, people can't afford this $100 software.
Read this right now, Marcus. Jason, I got an ad the other day for subscription shoes. You rent the shoes for X amount of time and then send them back to get new ones when they're worn out.
Oh, right, that system.
This is the future of non-ownership.
How long do I not have my toothbrush for before I got to ship it to Mike?
Everyone's making fun of me because I have quite a bit of pirated software on this computer, but Word, for some reason, I had to pay for monthly. So please
just
stop.
Use Google Docs, mate.
That's fine. I don't care if y'all make fun of me for paying for Word. The point is that there is this lack of ownership that we're becoming kind of okay with. Like, I used to own a shit ton of movies. Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah.
I know Mike used to have CDs, DVDs, tapes. I mean, you're from the UK, but you still have tapes and records.
For sure, yeah. I did, yeah. I remember them.
And then once the iPod came into being, we're like, oh, well, fuck, I can put all my music in one little spot, and this is so great, and I can shuffle everything, and yada, 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 yada. All my music at my fingertips. Once the for-pay services came to be, it's like, well, fuck it. Everything's on Spotify anyway, and this iPod apparently doesn't work anymore, so I'll just pay $10 a month for the records that I used to have.
Yeah. And it's like within a few years, having these huge binders of CDs.
You all not remember the binder?
Oh, man, come on. Come on. Well, the thing is, before cheap external hard drives was a thing,
Mm-hmm.
that was still very much how service members get through deployments, was like laptops and just slinging these DVDs through them. But then
Did I
all of a
tell
sudden you could get a terabyte of space
Yeah.
for $100, and then it was like, oh,
Did I tell you
that all
in
goes away.
Syria the story about the Turkish Marxists I was with? The ones at base camp would torrent like the latest Game of Thrones episode, then they'd put it onto a USB stick, and then the next car going to the front line, they'd take it with them and they'd watch it on the TV there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, the idea that someone wrote a little essay today in Medium about revolving revenue models, and they did mention the same thing. Mark, well, I'm on Patreon and Substack, but there's a difference between Patreon and Substack and me having to pay for shoes. And what's so funny about Riviera mentioning the shoes, they kind of jokingly mentioned the whole shoe thing.
Oh.
And I thought that was a bit of a stretch, but the more advertisements I get, the more I see that everything is a subscription service, to the point where you have so many subscription services like Amazon. You pay so much money for Amazon Prime, but the channel in Amazon cost as much as cable cost, if not more, which seems silly, but it's just subscription service after subscription service. And that, to me, that coupled with what Stefan was talking about as far as like the gig economy, like, look, we'll just get a poor person to do it. Drop off your food. Someone said in the chat, during the pandemic, nobody could go anywhere, but yet and still people were still dropping off McNuggets. And when you look at big COVID outbreaks that were happening,
There it goes. That's when the
yeah,
deep state
but
got
I was
him.
saying, like, I remember there was some point where kind of takeaway restaurants were closed in Britain to people to go there, but delivery drivers were still going there, and they weren't part of any like official company with any kind of health protection or anything. They were just walking in the front door and doing all this shit. Nope. Okay.
And before Jason does come back, and I don't know if you are going to end soon, Mike, if anytime you got to go and you're like,
No, fine. So I'm following what you're saying. I couldn't really get a way in.
I'm sorry.
I was listening for a while.
I got cut out. I'm sorry. Mexico doesn't like when I say certain shit. They get all mad. I was actually going to say good shit about Latin people, about how they're treated. So that kicked me off.
Mike, was there anything kind of burning you wanted to tell about the book, which you didn't get to say on any topic?
Not really. We covered the controversies a bit. I mean, I think the thing is, it's like an attempt to contextualize Fisher, and in doing that, maybe a little bit get things in perspective, because he's just become huge. But he's, nothing about him is really about him anymore. He's getting a bit like, I would say a bit like Marx, but that's an exaggeration. But you know how a lot of theorists are not, when people are thinking about a theorist, they're not really relating to the theory, they're relating to like some projection of the theorist. There's like some kind of archetype,
I mean, he's a bit like Kurt Cobain.
Well, maybe Cobain. Do you think?
Who's like Kurt Cobain?
I think Mark Fisher. Well, I think like anyone who's super famous, it's no longer about what they've done, but just about some kind of.
Would everyone agree that he got bigger though after death than he was during?
He definitely got bigger after death. Yeah, I don't know the figures, but of the 100,000 copies of Capitalist Realism sold, a lot of them have been sold since he died. And okay, so it was published in 2008 or 2009. He died in 2017. And in the 4 years since, most of those have been sold. But I think it's the death, but then it's also, I think it's partly Doug Lane doing stuff on YouTube, and that hadn't been done before. I mean, that wasn't really a thing, when Fisher was writing. It was all, it was tail end of theory blogging then. So Doug pushed a lot of YouTube type promotion of Fisher, and then you got the memeing, and like he blew up totally recently again to a new degree because of the Ocasio-Cortez dress, because people made memes about capitalist realism and the tax the rich dress, and then people started like googling what's this capitalist realism thing, because obviously most people haven't got a clue why that, you know, why Fisher was appended to this meme of AOC, and so he blew up again massively. So I think it will keep happening. But yeah, it's totally a meme culture and podcast and video thing now that's pushing him. But it's gone far beyond like actually him as a figure. And I think, you know, of course, he's indebted to the Frankfurt School and to many other theorists. So I think Fisher's great. I mean, I don't want to be anyone, you know, I don't want to be the one to say he's overrated. But I mean, there's something, you know, somehow he's a little bit lost. You know, where's the actual Fisher in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say in compared to like Cobain, and that kind of he died at kind of the point where he was just like coming towards like a position of real fame, and then after he died, people have projected like all sorts of different things onto him, where he's in no position to speak about it otherwise, and kind of you feel he's more relevant now than he was when he was alive, and like if he was, I mean, is it something you talk about in the book? Yeah, you talk about it near the beginning. Of like, what would Fisher think about kind of contemporary meme culture?
Yeah, well, there's a chapter called literally The Memeing of Mark Fisher, and it talks about, you know, how he probably would find some of it quite bizarre and not even like it. Like there's that really big Fisher meme, we be fucking on the Fisher bed tonight, or what is the exact phrase? I can't remember. And it comes from a meme trend of, you know, what is the actual literal phrase? I don't remember. I made a video about it, and I also wrote a book about it, but I don't remember. But something like, you know, whatever, we will be fucking on the Fisher bed tonight. But it comes from a meme trend of we will be fucking on like the X bed tonight, where X could be Minecraft. So, you know, there was already a trend for people taking these kind of bedspreads that do exist and say like, we'll be fucking on the Sesame Street, whatever bed tonight. And so, yeah, actually what first happened is somebody simply made a CGI of a bedspread, of a bed with a bedspread with capitalist realism on the bedspread. And that was actually independent of this other meme. And somebody came along and put the words, we'll be fucking on the Fisher bed tonight, on the Mark Fisher bed. Or is it a capitalist realism bed? I don't know. But the thing is, I mean, that's kind of weird if you knew Fisher at all, or even saw him like on videos or something, because he was really kind of quite a timid guy, you know, and he wouldn't have put himself about like that, you know, or not. I don't know what he did in his private life, but you know, he wasn't like putting across that public image. So he would have found that
without like the sexualized bit of it, it's kind of a reference to Mark Fisher merchandise, which would surely be an idea which would horrify him.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, what I say is that he would have laughed. He would have laughed. Of course, I'm sure he would have laughed. But he would have laughed like we laughed when we see left memes, and we all laugh like that because you know, we laugh because it's funny in a way, but we laugh out of desperation, like, yeah, we're all fucked. You know, that's basically the state of the left today. Yeah. So you know, he would have laughed cynically, and I think that's where we're at. But on the other hand, there is the very real possibility that somebody is sitting on a Mark Fisher bed spread now, watching us, and you know, thinking about revolution or whatever.
Whatever they're doing is probably really wrong.
But there are these two sides to it. Well, it was called "This Is Revolution," so I don't know. Maybe that, you know, it's not so bizarre. But yeah.
From Jason on that one.
Oh my god!
But where was I? Hang on. Fisher bed. Mark Fisher actually, he kept. He had a meme account on Facebook, and you know more about this than me. You were saying earlier that you made a new account. You made a Reddit based on it.
Yeah. So Mark Fisher made. There's a Vice article which chronicles this. Mark Fisher made a page dedicated to one of his ideas, Boring Dystopia, which is the idea that kind of, we imagine dystopia as kind of this horrifying, like smashing down, like violence everywhere. But in fact, Fisher was kind of saying that the the dystopia we're approaching is not like that. It's going to be really fucking boring. It's not going to be exciting dystopia. It's going to be boring dystopia. And so he made a Facebook page about this, which is mainly posting like weird shit from Britain. But eventually he was like, okay, this place isn't disrupting boring dystopia anyway. It's kind of just reproducing boring dystopia. So he deleted the Facebook page. And at that point, I made A Boring Dystopia, the subreddit, which is now absolutely massive. But correctly, as kind of Fisher said, it's now kind of a place of, it's completely genericized.
Yeah.
There's not really, you don't talk about Mark Fisher on there or these very ideas. It's just another.
Yeah, well, I think he was annoyed because people were just basically trolling and putting crap up on the boring dystopia. It lost its meaning of, like, you know, spreading some leftist message. I don't know exactly what annoyed him, but I mean, you probably know again more than me about this, but I know that he proceeded to delete every single follower because that was the only way you could close down a Facebook account then. So people were watching that account. I remember it. People were watching the account and people were going, hang on, why is everyone getting deleted? And they were expecting an answer from Fisher, but it was Fisher actually deleting everybody one by one. He deleted 3,000 people. He was so pissed off at how bad, how skewered this left-wing account had gone, like in the wrong direction. He was like there frantically.
You got deleted by Mark Fisher.
He was frantically getting rid of everyone. So, you know, obviously he's somebody who reacted badly to this stuff. He's somebody who got really het up about, you know, the way that left memesters stick around with, you know, left politics. Yeah, so I don't think he will like a lot of this stuff, you know, that's going on.
Well, that's funny because I don't really like A Boring Dystopia anymore, but a few people in the chat quite like it. So maybe this is just what happens with anything you make.
Well, what is it? You either die the hero or live long enough to become
The villain.
the admin on the Reddit. That doesn't mean anything anymore.
And on that note, I'm getting told that we ran a little long because Pascal and I are trying to do a bunch of shows so we can have a few weeks off in December. Mike Watson,
Yes, thank you.
author of The Memeing of Mark Fisher. Wherever you are watching this show, there are links in the description to the book. Thank you for joining us. I'm serious about having you back. I won't bring out.
I'd love to come back. Yeah, sorry for I wasn't taking your hint earlier that you wanted to wrap up, but yeah, okay.
No.
Yeah. You did say half an hour.
We're not trying to force you out.
20 minutes, no, but you said 20 minutes ago you were like, I think Mike's getting tired and maybe it's time. And then I was like, I mean, I was actually nearly dropping off at a point. And they, but not because I don't like being here, but it's just because I'm not as energetic as everyone else here today.
Because you got a kid, that's why.
I'm English as well. I'm English.
Like I have children, so I know you're
okay. Yeah.
That's your only kid. This new one is your only kid.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes. He's 6 months old.
Okay, and you decided to change diapers in your 40s like me. That is, you are a insane man.
Doing that daily, and yeah, it does take its toll.
Yeah. No, I'm. Hey, look. I see that look in your eye, and that's the look of a man that's changed some large diapers. So I know that look.
Thank you. Yeah.
Duty.
I like that. Yeah.
That's the look of a man that stayed up all night because somebody couldn't go to sleep. I know that look.
Too right. Yeah. That's good. I'm going to use that excuse now. This was always my face, but now I have. As long as the baby's still young, I have that excuse.
Oh God!
The look behind the eyes is purely baby related. It's not about.
it's all baby related.
It's not all the problems of the world that we're talking about.
Yeah.
No, it's the problems are that damn baby touching.
Someone did 1,000 baby diaper stare in.
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Stefan, thank you guys so much for helping me out while I was constantly getting kicked offline by the Mexican deep state. You did question the shit out of me when I crossed the border recently, and I'll save that for another show. You're like, what the fuck were you doing in Mexico? I was like, living my life, bitch. Don't ever say it to the border guards. Peace.